Hi, and welcome back to another console info dump. And this time we are looking at the Nintendo 64, which is my favorite Nintendo console, of course. I've mentioned this before. And immediately when you look at the Nintendo 64, you might be reminded of the Super Nintendo. In fact, form factor wise, this was the first Nintendo console that was actually consistent across all regions. So when it comes to the actual color, the shape, placement of controller ports, and everything, there are no huge differences between the different consoles. In fact, this one doesn't even say. This is a PAL version, N64, obviously, because I'm finished, but there's really physically nothing hugely different about this. The only place where you might notice little differences is obviously in when you look at the game cartridges. This obviously has German and French on the back, and obviously it has the round Nintendo seal of quality on it. So with these kinds of these later consoles, you're going to have to look for more subtle uh, signs that this is the European version. And really, yes, again, we will see some markings up here. Now, actually, since we're looking at the bottom, you will notice there is the exit sign there. So that hatch actually hides a little port that in Japan you could use to connect this to the N64, the 64DD or disk drive. Now that's an accessory that was never, unfortunately, released outside of Japan. The Super Nintendo also has that. But that's a similar kind of port that was used for the Satellaview. Now, I already kind of showed the back of this in the Super Nintendo video, but just to give a little glimpse here into the rear. So this entire big compartment here is meant for the, as it says there, AC adapter. So the power block actually goes in here. And here we have the quote-unquote multi-out outlet. So first of all, about the N64, it has one of the most unique power bricks of all the Nintendo consoles in that it literally goes in and snaps fast into the console itself. And then the cord, the actual plug end is then just the simple cord here. Now, I actually really like this design choice because the difference between this and the power blocks that were on the Super Nintendo and NES is that the box doesn't need to be on the ground anywhere, so it's not in the way. You just have a nice, long, clean cord, quite a substantial length of power cord. And yeah, this is really nice. I really like this. Now, the only negative I could say maybe about this power block has to do a little bit with the console aesthetic, and its spatial, or the amount of space that it takes up. And yes, this will get a little bit warm, obviously, the longer you play it. But the N64 didn't really have any huge heat issues as such. Now, the big thing that you really need to be worried about, obviously if the console doesn't come with a power block, that's a bit of a problem. But the real thing that you have to look out for is the AV cord setup here. So this console no longer has any kind of RF switch because those had kind of fallen out of favor with consoles by the mid-90s. So it instead uses this proprietary multi-out cord, which you will remember, comes out to this regular old RCA end. I'm using the SCART converter from my Xbox 360. That's just because I had this plugged in on TV. I actually had to pull it out in order to show for video. But basically, the end is just a standard RCA, so nothing fancy about this. But this is a bit of a problem because, this is a proprietary cord standard. Only Nintendo used this. And I mentioned that these things were also sold separately as an accessory that you can buy. So if you're lucky, you might be able to find some of these just floating around online if you get one of these consoles and for some reason it does not come with this cord. But I've also mentioned in the Super Nintendo video that this exact same RCA cord was used for the Super Nintendos. Not all Super Nintendos came with these, but this was also used in the GameCube. So if you are looking to get one of these consoles online and it doesn't have this cord, then you should also look out for a Super Nintendo or a GameCube because they use this exact same cord standard and they're completely interchangeable. There's no difference between these. This is just the chord standard that Nintendo used. On the front here, and let's see if it does it again. No. Yes, in the Super Nintendo video, I freaked out because the power LED did actually come on for a brief second and I flipped the switch. But I guess that was just kind of a little fluke there. So yes, this one has a power switch, just like the Super Nintendo does, and has a reset button. And the game cartridges, they go in like this. And there is no, well, there is a little bit of a cartridge wobble in the cartridge place. But my experience is that the N64 cartridges are just so robust and heavy that they tend to sit very firmly in here. This also has this nice little door that I like. And in here, is the where you would put the N64 memory expansion pack, the one that came with Donkey Kong 64, and this is indeed it. I'm actually not able to. I've actually forgotten how you take this out. That's why I haven't taken it out. It's not really coming off very easily. But then again, so basically this is essentially just a RAM upgrade for the console, and to be honest, the vast majority of N64 games don't require this, and you can tell the actual RAM chip or whatever it is that goes in there, it does not have this red side to it. So if you see this, then you know that the N64 already has the expansion pack in it. So that's a good thing. But basically, the number of N64 games that actually use it is very, very small. You obviously need it to play Donkey Kong 64. It's absolutely required if you want to play Majora's Mask, and Perfect Dark essentially is completely unplayable without it. You can play like the tutorial stage, but yeah, but the vast majority of N64 games don't really use it, and the ones that do usually just make the game run, a little bit smoother, or they might include slightly higher resolution, which is not, this is still a standard definition console, but so, there's not that much of a difference. And here is an N64 controller, but this is, as you can see, this is a third-party aftermarket controller. As a result, the analog stick on this is a bit sturdier. But the thing that you need to be worried about with these non-Nintendo controllers is that they can be a little oversensitive, in my experience. So I still have my original N64 controllers. I just got this one to try out because I was interested. And you can definitely feel that the plastic feels a lot cheaper and lighter, but it does work. It's a fully functional controller. But for certain games, you are going to notice that the analog stick is way more sensitive than what was on in the original ones. And that can cause some problems. For instance, GoldenEye is completely unplayable with this controller because the crosshair will just kind of jiggle uncontrollably. And I would also be wary of any really games that require that kind of precision aiming controls. I mean, there's not too many games on the N64 like that. If I have to complain and gripe about something, like the number one thing that everybody probably knows is that these analog sticks on the original N64 controllers were kind of notoriously fragile, that if the games were being played, if you were playing a lot, then these sticks had a tendency of kind of leaning in one direction. In our case, our original analog stick leans quite a bit forward, which is really problematic for games like Mario 64, Donkey Kong, but any game really where you want to move forward, basically, and you have to do it by pressing the analog stick, it's a bit of a problem. There are a lot of games that use the D-pad as a secondary control, but not that many, so you have to be kind of careful with that. Now, if I have to gripe about something else besides the analog stick that I think everybody is aware of, then the other one is that I do have to say, while I do like the look of the N64, it's a very sleekly designed console, nice black finish and everything, but the shape of this console is honestly a little maddening once you start to realize it, and it has a lot of spatial economy issues that are not apparent when you first look at it. I mean, first of all, if we look at the console straight up, you notice that it's not straight in any sense. There's these big old chunky legs at the front here, and trying to put anything next to this is just maddening. But also, the cord is quite thick, and this one does not have. Some of the N64 controllers come with, like, I think it's some kind of an interference preventer, like a little plastic knob that there's a little bit of cord here, and then a plastic knob here. And the thing is, you basically do not want, even though it's a top-loading system, you really do not want to put this in front of any or on top of any other consoles because basically these cords are so junky that if you have like a console beneath it that you would load from the front, let's say an like an Xbox 360 or an NES, it's basically impossible to place this on top of anything and have anything below it be usable. And the other problem is it's hard to line up this next to a console. If you don't have a lot of room, it's really hard to put anything next to this because it takes up a lot of space at the front, but then there's a lot of empty back here. And I also don't really like that the outline of the console changes so dramatically when you put in the power brick. So it's a good looking console, but like from a spatial economy wise, I honestly do think almost all of Nintendo's other consoles are a little bit more practical. The NES, it's just a big old box, but it's pretty harmless. And then the SNES is quite sleek. The GameCube doesn't take up a lot of space. The Wii is really tiny. I don't know. This is just a weird lumpy shape that it has. It has really big chunky cords. That feels really weird. But I still like it. I'm not gonna complain it too much. Now, there's nothing like technologically very special about the console itself. So I decided I should really just give a little quick overview of the different accessories that go into the port on the controller. And the first one, and probably the least noticeable one of these, is the N64 memory card. Yes, the N64 also had memory cards. This is something that a lot of people don't know about. And it's probably this accessory was not very it's called the controller pack, but basically it is just the same as like a memory card on a PlayStation or something, and it's used pretty much for the exact same purpose. Most people will probably know that these things were needed if, for instance, Mario Kart, you wanted to save your lap times. This was an external medium that you would have to save it on. But beyond that, those little things, most N64 games, of course, have a battery pack save, so there is a battery inside the cartridge that saves the game. So normally you would think you would not really need this, but there was one game publisher who insisted on using these, and this is something that you have to be wary of if you are buying games for the N64. Any games by Konami tended to use the controller pack for save games. I have three games published by Konami. One of them is International Superstar Soccer 64. And for that, actually, the controller pack actually makes a little bit of sense because you can save your custom players and name change. And if you want to change the names of the players in the game, it saves that all on this. And it's pretty generous. Of course, like I said, most games didn't use this, so that's why it's got a lot of free memory on it. I really cannot. No, it's difficult to compare this to something like PlayStation memory cards, which in my view are almost always woefully tiny. Like you will inevitably have to remove data at some point if you have enough games for the PlayStation. But yeah, so basically, if you're getting Konami games on the N64, like be careful, you are going to need one of these if you want to save anything. And I think it was just Konami being a big cheapskate and not wanting to put it in a battery back save into the cartridge. Now, this is probably the most famous of the add-ons for the N64. This is an N64 Rumble pack, and this did come with Star Fox 64, or Lylat Wars, as it was called over here. And I did not get this with Lylat Wars. I do not have Lylat Wars for the original system. I bought this separately later on, and this basically was the first ever major Rumble feature that was available for consoles. And this, of course, is what inspired then, Sony to create the DualShock controller. Now, the thing that you do need to know about this, and if I show it here, so you put it in there, and depending on the game, a lot of early N64 games will obviously not have support for this because they came out before the DualShock came out, but most later N64 games surprisingly do, including Ocarina of Time. There's a secret stone item in the game that tells you when you're near a secret by shaking the controller a little bit. but in my opinion, this is probably the least useful of the appliances that you can get for the N64, because I frankly do not care for rumble feature in most games. And the most annoying thing, of course, is that you need batteries separately for it, because this is an external add-on. It doesn't take any. It doesn't take any electricity from the controller itself, and so yeah, and it uses tiny little AAA batteries, so that's a little bit of a pain in the ass, honestly. Um, I mean, sure, if you want rumble features for your N64, lots of games do have it. So, knock yourself out. You can get one of these and put it in. I personally just don't like these because I don't like rumble features in games. And also, the controller's plenty big enough. You saw that it actually makes the controller even bigger. Now, this is the second. This is probably the second most well-known accessory for the N64, and this is the uh, N64 transfer pack. As you can see, there is a slot in there that is big enough for a Game Boy cartridge, and the transfer pack came along with Pokemon Stadium 1. I don't think it came with Stadium 2, and even though this looks like this would have been like the N64 equivalent of the Super Game Boy, unfortunately, you can only use this for Pokemon games, Gen 1 and 2. Gen 1 for Stadium 1, obviously, and then Gen 2 for Gen 1 and 2 for Stadium 2. And it's a bit of a shame, honestly, because this was really only used to transfer your Pokemon from Game Boy to Pokemon Stadium so you could use them in the game. You could, however, play Pokemon. You could play Pokemon Blue, Red, Yellow, and then whatever the hell the Gen 2s are called. I'm sorry, I dropped off the Pokemon bandwagon around that time, so I forget what they're called. They're gold and silver, aren't they? So anyway, so it does function a little bit like the Super Game Boy, in that you can only play five different games with this. So as cool as it looks, and I do think this is actually the coolest looking of all of these add-ons, even though it is the biggest and junkiest of them all. But it is a shame a little bit that you could not play any other Game Boy games with this, because it would have honestly been a pretty cool accessory otherwise. So anyway, that was the N64, a little info dump on it. See you on the next one. Bye-bye.